Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Movie Lessons. Today we got something going on. It's going to be a little bit funky. We're going to blow your mind. We're actually going to talk about scripting, and we're going to have a little bit longer episode than normal. So I'll call it a holiday special, if you will, not like the Star Wars one. But what we are going to do is we're going to show you some work that James and I have done over the years, and we're going to talk to you about scripting, about the different acts, Act 1, 2, and 3, and we're going to talk about the difference between a short film and a trailer. In order to do that, we actually want to show you some of our work, as I said. So, without further ado, let's get to it.
Alright guys, a couple years ago I approached Rob after helping a couple people film a short skit for a company that I work for, because I knew Rob had a lot more experience editing things. So what we were able to do is we were kind of able to sit down with some of the footage that we filmed that night and see what holes there were, or at least what we can try to compose with it. There were a lot of holes to fill with this thing because unfortunately the people who were filming it really didn't have like a cohesive story. They just had like a rough idea, no real script. But with a little bit of editing masterwork and a lot of
14-hour days.
2 14-hour days, yeah. Spent basically a full 28 hours in this thing, and having to go back for reshoots, and having to go, ask people, hey, can you come in after work or before work? So, but just to get a rough premise of this is that two competing groups of people want to have some type of race using vehicles found at a theme park. Other than that, that was about all I think anybody really knew. They kind of learned their lines 10 seconds before they said them. But as everyone kind of had a rough idea of what was going to happen, that's when, as a director, you have to kind of look at it and be almost a cinematographer, or at least take your cinematographer's word of what looks good. How can you incorporate this camera movement? What can you do? Because otherwise, either something's going to look very flat, or you can film it like, for example, this was filmed at kind of 3/4 angle, not only to highlight there's a difference in the characters, but also more than likely because we didn't want to show the background. The background right behind them actually showed the fact that they weren't moving.
One of the things you guys are going to see here is, lighting-wise, you can see a lot of contrast, so you can actually tell when different cameras are used. But the other thing you see is there's some digitization, and granted it's how it was shot, but one of the things that when I was editing it, I had to do to kind of create additional speed to trim out the shot because it was just too wide, was I went in digitally zoomed a lot of stuff, did a lot of keyframe editing to really try and make it look right. I did a lot of brightening, playing with the colors, blowing some out. Sometimes it was bringing some light because a lot of stuff was really dark.
Pretty much the only thing that we had to film with was a standard video camera and flashlights. That was about the only light source that we were allowed to bring on set, other than whatever was pre-existing. So yeah, you get to see some of the colors either end up being washed out or the contrast being turned up very high, but that's mostly because of the fact of the light was only what we had available. So that's just disturbing.
One of the fun things about projects like this is actually where for me doing editing, when the first day we sat down, we dumped all the footage into my computer, loaded it all into Vegas, and we spent some time and went through it and paced it out. And the original one really, and this is no offense to the original filmmakers, it was very, very missing. There's tons of holes. There was, as James said earlier, there's no cohesive story.
The biggest thing was the pacing. The fact that the pacing really didn't feel like it was supposed to be a race film. It felt like it lagged, especially towards the middle of it. So to try to instill that sense of action, we had to speed up the cuts that we were using, as well as also include other additional things. So,
and there are certain shots that the original group really wanted to have, this being one of them. And so you have to find a way to make some of these comedic moments play. As a director, as a writer, what looks good on paper doesn't always look good on screen. What you think's going to look on screen may not always happen. So that was one of the things we really got challenged with when doing this project.
Yeah, cars, bikes, boards,
and of course you have to have a little bit of vim in that.
but had a deal.
It was fun, you know, and that's the end result. Is you know, a lot of you guys are doing this. You know, we did this. There was no money involved. It was all about having fun.
Considering it was filmed essentially one night and maybe one more additional night for pickups, and then edited in 2 full days. And with no professional actors, no professional lighting, no professional anything, and nobody really even knew kind of what they were doing at the beginning of it. That's when we were just like, all right, we need to kind of look at this and say, if we're going to do this again, what do we need to change? And that's where this next one comes in. Okay, it's always good to begin with some type of big beginning. Unfortunately, this is not the big beginning that a lot of people were expecting. And I think it worked really well, especially for comedy. So we were able to kind of catch the attitude that this film was supposed to have, which is, it feels very put together. And that was the entire concept, was the fact that the theme park is running out of money and therefore has to do something else, and they end up using Nerf guns instead. And as you can see, it's got this kind of like hodgepodge, you know, last minute attitude toward it.
It's because it was.
It was.
We thought it out, but it was very last minute.
So we're able to set up what the beginning is supposed to be, and of course with your first act you want to establish the introduction to the characters and also what the plot is supposed to be. So during this, as the manager is kind of going over the information of, you know, what the premise of the movie is, we're starting to become introduced to some of the characters, although not necessarily in their roles where they're supposed to be. Now, again, all of this was filmed roughly within about 2 nights. This beginning portion was actually filmed the last thing of the first night. So it was about midnight when we ended up filming this. So a lot of people were just either already tired, some people weren't completely in costume, which is why you see them all hunched over. And again, we didn't really have a lot of light to work with. We only had the available light that was there, or occasional flashlights, which is what you'll see in this next scene when the characters appear really dark. Which is something that you want to make sure that you're doing when you're working on film, is that you always bring enough light. As I've heard Rob say, get enough sunlight, get enough light to equal sunlight, and then add 1 extra bulb.
Yep.
Because otherwise, you know, it's easier to dim light, it's easier to shade, it's easier to do something than to, you know, try to add light in afterwards. I think one of the other thing also is you can kind of see through here is the fact that the characters kind of appear a bluish green, and then later that they don't. This is because since they were filmed after hours, the security lights were on. So, and the color of the camera wasn't white balancing out for it. So they had a tendency to look a little bit more fluorescent, which is more of a greenish hue than natural stage lighting.
And sometimes you're going to want to do that. I mean, if you look at a lot of Hong Kong films, a great example is Beast Cops. They use a lot of true fluorescent lighting, natural lighting. Chungking Express is another great example. They purposefully do that. They purposely, because it's the look, it's the style they want to go with. The problem is with this, like the introduction for the Joker character, you know, we really wanted to show the face more. Him to originally be
really dark,
very dark, and come out of the dark. And the problem is, no equipment allowed in. You got to do what you got to do. Yeah. That's the joy of being a no-budget film. But one of the things that to talk about the scripting a little bit, one of the things that you see as we go through this, you know, you're getting introductions. You've already seen what the issue is. This is Act 2. This is what the problem is. This is the reality behind, hey, we're going to give you guys Nerf guns. Okay, well, now insanity is ensuing. What's going to become the resolution? How do we resolve these problems? So as you're writing scripts, keep that in mind. Act 1 is introduction to the characters, introduction to the world, and introduction to potentially what the problem is. Act 2 is the reality of the problem. And then Act 3 is going to be the resolution. That's really dumbing it down. That's really making it very simplistic. But when you make anything, that's the easiest way to do it.
I will give the advantage to the fact that this film actually had a script written out by a couple of people that were writing out the dialogue, but there was one section of script that in parentheses just said action scene. And the entire point from when they're leading from the old Chicago gangster area all throughout the Wild West and even through part of the next scene was part of that action scene. So the original script was only about, 3 pages long, but the benefit was we were able to make stuff up. Like, this was something that was thought up at the last moment, and it was like, well, wait a minute, wouldn't it be great if, kind of similar to the Dark Knight, where something blows up and the Joker's not supposed to be, paying attention to it. And again, stuff thrown in, we were kind of looking at this as a very last minute type of thing, and in reality that's what you have to work with. You have to be creative on the spar, and the thing with that is the fact that when you're having these things that aren't specifically scripted out, you have to look at it and go, okay, what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? And then, of course, you have other people that throw stuff in last minute. We're just like, hey, do you mind if this particular person has a cameo? You mind if something else happens here? You mind this and that happens? And you'll have a lot of that, especially from, your actors saying, well, I want to portray it this way. I want to do this way. And you do have to take some of their kind of their information in hand, but really compare it to what the script is written about, because someone could do something saying, well, I feel that the character would do this. Well, yeah, but the script says the character does something else.
One of the things you guys got to keep in mind is, it doesn't hurt to shoot things a couple times. One of my personal favorites, and I know James as well, moments of impromptu is in Empire Strikes Back, the whole I love you, I know scene. Well, it was supposed to be I love you being said by Carrie Fisher to Harrison Ford, who replies, I love you. Boom, gets frozen in carbonite. Well, they shot that. They legitimately shot that scene, and Harrison's like, this is not Han Solo. This is not how it is. He should say something like, I know. Okay, let's shoot it. And that's what they went with. That was an unscripted moment. So, shoot the script. But at the same time, shoot the non-script. Because you never know what you're actually going to get. You might get that gold moment where you're like, oh, yeah, this doesn't play. And one of the things that goes on with these pieces that we're seeing right now, there is some inside jokes. And so there's some moments where you guys are watching this kind of going like, really? Like, wow, okay. It's stuff that plays well for its intended audience, which is people that work at this theme park, people actually watching this. Some moments are just comedy, and that's all it is, and some it's, like I said, inside jokes. So if you don't get that, it doesn't apply. So when you're making a movie, especially if you're doing something comedic like this, remember, inside jokes are only good for those that are on the inside. You can have an inside joke with your characters that has been explained to the audience. That will work well. But in a lot of these, like, hey, weren't we supposed to have a vehicle? Kind of an inside joke that we put into and to help create that more for the audience watching, like you guys. It adds to it. It creates that whole process. And as you see here, you don't need fancy graphics to create credits. All you need is a pretty sexy hand like mine, writing on some yellow paper with who, what, where, whens, and whys, doing a little doodling, taking a coffee cup with cold coffee, running the coffee on the bottom of the cup, sticking on the paper, and there you have it.
Yep, strangely enough, the page flipping back wasn't anything that we used a mat or mask for. We actually had a piece of flat black material, and as the page flipped over, it exposed that. So,
and I forgot what AYS.
Ask your mama, she knows biatch.
There you go. Thank you. That was our last minute, like. After the first one, they're like, who's Rob Ray? Oh, well, now you know.
Yep.